Let me start recording. All right, it's Wednesday, February 11th. It's Digital Roundtable time, and we have a great guest today. And we have Llewellyn in DC and John Butler in Gray Hills, Austin, and I am also in Kyle, Texas. So we're all spread out. And things are, happening. Just got back from Distributech, and Distributech was amazing. 18,000 power engineers running around discussing the future of data centers and the infrastructure of power in the US and the competition with China. And the dominant technology was AI, AI everywhere, AI for everything you could possibly imagine, from making your smoothies to running your power grid. Uh, it's quite amazing what's happening. So, but before we get going, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some music.
The only thing in life that's worth living are guitars that's tuned well and good-looking women. And I don't need my name in the marquee lights. I got you in my arms tonight. So maybe it's time we got back to the basis of love. Let's go to Lukenbach, Texas. Willing, wailing, and the boys. In this successful life we're living, got us feeling like the Hatfields and McCoys. Between Jeff Willis Wright song and Newberry's train song, blue eyes trying in the rain. Back in Lukenbach, Texas, ain't nobody feeling no pain.
All right. Thank you, Johnny.
I thought that was appropriate.
Thank you, Johnny. Llewellyn, we're gonna give you the floor first. Llewellyn, I know that you're pressed for time, perhaps, but go ahead.
I really am pressed, and I apologize for it. I'm coming to you from the Amtrak Lounge at Union Station in Washington, and thank you for having me on the broadcast. I've been talking to a lot of people, bringing around what people in government, people out of government, people in the private sector, lobbyists, etc. And I find a pervasive uncertainty, not quite clear, but a certain sense that they don't know what the future holds, whether it's in Iran, whether it's in Ukraine, what our relationship with our former friends in Europe is going to be, how the tariffs are going to full-time impact, and where we will be in just a few months. We don't know if there'll be electricity shortages through the summer. The projections are not encouraging. So I tell you that Washington is fine. It's still got a lot of snow on the ground, and there is a certain anxiety about the future.
Well, it's as it should be, given all the challenges that the world is facing these days, and I know there's a lot of juggling and changing of the guards and changing of strategies and changing of major systems. What say you, John Butler?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think the uncertainty has moved throughout the world. I think if you look at the international scene, we have a new hegemony in the world, which is China, which is really a really hegemony in terms of the hegemon and in terms of the experiences of the world. What I mean by that, I think that if you look at what's happening with the southern countries, that I think people can look now, are looking now, to China for a model of the future. You know, we had a model of the future. It was the American dream. Everybody came here to do great things. And, our system of democracy, along with modern capitalism, certainly is there. And I think what happened with China, they've taken our system of capitalism and put it connected to the Marxist Communist Party agenda, and they've done extremely well. Have brought billions of people, a billion people out of poverty in the last 40 years, has the highest gross national product now, and of course, right now, trying to recruit great professors to their universities. So I think that's going on if you look at in the midst of all of it, it is all of this technology. And as you know, I kind of specialize in creating companies for people, and I've been more active than I've been active in the last, gosh, since the great miracle of Austin, Texas. The activity around new venture startup, the activity around the drones as we move to the cloud economy is absolutely amazing. I have never seen so much international cooperation in terms of starting companies. I have never seen a $1 billion company with a one person, with just one people, which means that working in labor would be an issue. So Llewellyn is correct. The uncertainty around the future, whether it's in, if you go back and look at our revolution, if we look at our Civil War, the uncertainty has been there. The question now is, now that we have a now hegemony in the world, which is China, I think that changes things a bit. Now I say that because the Chinese scientists are building their own airplanes, that is, their jet aircraft. They have the atom bomb. They have a strong military, a Navy, Air Force, and et cetera. And then, of course, if we look at what's going on with the Brits, with the Southern situation, well, I think it changes things. But what has always brought America through is an emphasis on new venture development, an emphasis on job creation, and an emphasis on opportunity. I don't think I would have the same opportunity if I moved to China. I think it's structured differently. And I think that if you look at America, most of our great companies have come from immigrants. If you look at Silicon Valley, 60% of those companies were immigrants. We now have some interesting stuff that's going around immigration in American society. The objection to the Super Bowl halftime, which said divided people rather than brought people together. But if we look back to the core of what America is, New York City is great because of its immigrants. San Francisco is great because of its immigrants. Miami is great because of its Miami immigrants. And these are constructive border cities, people that bring people to the country that's looking for a way to do things. But the question, as Llewellyn said, is given the warlike structure of what's going on in America, given colonization is back, as people try to take land and take companies, take countries, and etc. So what we do, Andreas, is to make sure that all the cities are smart. If I look at what I'm doing in Austin, Texas, we're anticipating 8 million more people moving to Texas between San Antonio and Georgetown. We're looking at a whole new infrastructure of smart trains in Texas. The wealth creation in Texas is completely off the scale. The job creation in Texas is completely off of the scale. And with all of that, we have all the political issues that we've had for years, given the history of Texas. But it is different now. It's almost like 1776 when you can have soldiers go into the communities and to do things. So with all of that, you look forward to the innovation and right now we're looking forward to how our smart cities can do great things and how our cities prepare for the future, at least in Texas, with all of the millions of people coming here. And what would a small town like Kerrville do when it grows to 1.5 million? God bless America.
Let me let me switch to our guest and remind everybody that one of the things that I was blessed with this year is I got invited to go to Davos, Switzerland, and basically after spending a week there and pitching Project Austin, which is a consortium of applied research and commercialization of technology, we were lucky enough to strike a partnership with the World Economic Forum and the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals Lab to create a SDG City Index, SDG City Roadmap, and SDG City Maturity Model. And we are being focused on interviewing cities from the beginning of the year. And we are lucky to have Dalton Rice, City Manager of Kerrville, Texas. Kerrville is a city in the county seat of Kerr County, Texas, United States. population roughly 24,000 per the 2020 census. I'm sure that number is up dramatically. We'll hear from Dalton in a second. Kerrville is named after James Kerr, a major in the Texas Revolution and friend of settle founder Joshua Brown, who settled in the area and started a shingle making camp. Prior to Kerrville, as a city manager, Dalton was for city manager for Morgan's Point Resort, and he's also a veteran of the U.S. Army Special Forces. Thank you for your service, Dalton. And he brings a diverse background that includes experience in as a paramedic, as a firefighter, as a healthcare administrator. He holds a BS in business administration and law, um, uh, and MHSS in healthcare quality, and is a certified public manager, doing perhaps, in my opinion, my favorite job of all time and most difficult job of all time, running a city. Welcome, Dalton.
I appreciate it. Thank you all for having me.
Well, Dalton, tell us
Dal-
about the latest in Kerrville and what are you working on? What are your top programs? I see your website and I see all kinds of strategic initiatives going on, but give us the latest and greatest.
Yeah, I want to kind of hit on what, John and, Llewellyn kind of said. I love the international politics, love the national politics, try to stay abreast of it as much as I possibly can. And, I think it's a great segue into how important local government is on a local level and the impact that you can have on a community, really of any size, if you will, and just how things, the dynamic is changing, the how politics are just, I mean, they're getting even more divisive than they already have been, and over the years.
Mhm.
um and both you and John had kind of said, surprisingly, Kerrville is not growing very fast. We are just over probably 25,000 population right now. We are growing maybe 1.3% a year, population wise. We are really only adding about $35 million of new value each year into the city. Some of that is terrain. It is very expensive and difficult to build here in the hill country. Um, and yeah, we're kind of in a stabilized growth, and it's been consistent, which adds a lot of challenges. We're about 23 square miles roughly. We do sit at the seat of Kerr County, which is about 55,000 population. And we are kind of a regional hub. We're kind of the gateway to the west. Everything west of us is more West Texas area. And then the next big place is San Angelo. You got Junction and a few other small cities, but we're kind of a big staging point for emergency response and emergency management. And yeah, I mean, obviously we have the Guadalupe River that runs through. It's kind of a big staple of who we are, and in our economy. We do have some tourism as well. We do have a 4-year university, Shriner University, and so yeah, we are not growing very fast as a lot of people think, and that kind of poses a lot of new challenges that we're dealing with in the political spectrum, especially on in Texas politics, which I'm sure both y'all are aware of is very interesting right now.
Yeah, Llewellyn.
Um, Very interesting, Dalton. What do you see as your major challenge?
I guess let me throw one back at you. In what area? Politics and the economy and what?
And how do you resolve your challenge?
Yeah, so I would have to say right now, one of our biggest challenges, and every city in Texas is going to face it at some point, is going to be revenue streams. Is going to be, how do you sustain the general fund? Every city is different on their general fund. The way the state has really um, hampered cities' abilities to raise, property taxes. They put a property tax cap, Senate Bill 2 during the, 86 legislation. Their argument is we'll just go to the voters, to raise taxes if you need it. Well, that sounds great in theory. I don't get to vote on the state budget, so we want local control to be local control, but the state's kind of taken that away. Um, sales taxes is there, but unless you're in a high growth area, you're not getting the benefit of growth. And so when you start stabilizing out, our 10 biggest expenditures in cities are personnel related, from salaries to group health, to retirement, with the economy and all of those, costs going up. I'm not able to even, to keep up with inflationary factors of the healthcare industry, of personnel and salaries and cost of living. And that is probably our biggest challenge in a stabilized growth city.
Mm-hmm.
Dalton, is there any technology or any innovation that you're especially proud of that you want to share with other cities?
I would say we're probably right in the middle of the road when it comes to the, use of technology. We do use AI, but probably not to the extent that we really could. We do have a department of innovation and technology. They kind of do a lot of performance metrics. We try to really do some quantitative analysis and some database or data-based decisions, if you will, business decisions. We use AI really from a more of an efficiency standpoint to, again, a great example is we have agenda bills, a summary of what is going to be on the agendas. Well, if you put too much technical in there, it gets lost. If you put too much legalese in there, it gets lost. And so we can easily template that information and have our directors be able to really come up with a good summary that is clean and easy to read. And so we're starting to get into the AI world. But again, all of this costs money. And that's some of the biggest challenges. Most of my stuff goes into personnel, which leaves a lot less, for the technology piece of things.
Yeah.
And what is your crunch point? Some cities have a problem with solid waste, some with liquid waste, some electricity, some with transient population. What is your ongoing problem of that nature?
As crazy as it sounds, it's probably politics. We navigate. We're a full service city. We do own an electric company. We have some of the lowest rates in the state of Texas, not on power to choose. Our water department we made some changes to where we were very heavily reliant on irrigation for sustainable revenue. We've actually backed that off quite a bit, about 40% in the last 2 years. So we're no longer relying on irrigation in a drought-ridden, area. We are one of the first cities in the state of Texas in the 80s, mid 80s, to get an aquifer storage and recovery well. So we actually have 2 ASR wells, and we pump water back into the aquifer after we treat it. We do about 80% surface water, about 20% groundwater. And we're looking at some more redundancy, with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, we have some relatively low water rates, in comparison to other areas in the region. Not to mention the redundancy of having a diverse portfolio within the water world compared to most. We are one of the very few permits remaining that we can pump out exactly 1-for-1 of what we pump into the aquifer, which is kind of unique. Nowadays, it's not the case. I think Austin is even going through a permit, now, or somewhere in Central Texas where I think it's 50-50. You pump in, you can only pull 50% of that out.
Yeah.
So
That's very interesting. My final question, because I have to leave, unfortunately, and I apologize for that. But my final question is, if I were the CEO of a growing high-tech company, why would I move it to Kerrville?
Yeah, great question. We have about 87 acres. We've just upped our economic development both in the region and locally. We are looking and talking with different companies and different groups, especially through Greater SATX, a partnership. Um, we are a true economic engine, if you will. I call it the three-legged stool, workforce, housing, and jobs. and we actually monitor our unemployment rate. And right now our unemployment rate is relatively low. City Council over the past 2 years has increased multifamily projects coming in. We did a big attainable housing project that's going to add about 62 new homes in each year for the next 7 years, give or take. And so we're tackling the different, economic engines that are driving it. And so workforce is a challenge everywhere you go. And so unless you're in a major metropolitan that you can, poach off of other industries. Out here, we're a self-licking ice cream cone, and we only poach off of a couple of other small cities around here, or we poach within the city. And so we're starting to tackle the housing crisis or housing initiative. And, we're starting to look for those high impact jobs, manufacturing and some other stuff. We just got national status on our airport. So we're adding some more, economic amenities and some assets, into the community. And we're actually about to put in $1 billion worth of developments coming in that's going to add a tournament level golf course, and add about $1 billion worth of
Revenues.
not revenue,
Well,
but
be careful with the golf course, because John Sibley Butler will be down, and that will reduce the value of your housing.
Well, come on.
Let's build some more courses. I love you too, Llewellyn.
And likewise, I
Johnny,
thank you all so much and apologize, but I do have to go. I've got to get on the train.
thank you,
Thank you.
Llewellyn.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Good luck,
Johnny,
golf.
jump
Yeah,
in.
Llewellyn, take care of yourself. Be good.
Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah, it's very, very interesting when we look at cities, and I'm gonna move the analysis away to say that you're really sitting on a platform, and geographically, you're a small city, but you're no different than Austin or Dallas or Houston because you sit on a platform.
Correct.
That is, my interaction with Kerrville or my interaction with Waco is all the same, because we have reduced the communication distance with the internet. So my first question is, how is your city taking advantage of all of the data that's available with the smart stuff in the city? Whether it's smart red lights, smart smart traffic lights, smart housing, smart buildings, and in terms of how do you see that for the future? That's my first question.
Yeah, I would say a lot of our stuff, especially out, towards, the hill country in West Texas, is a lot of water conservation. How do we prepare water for the future? That was a big topic of discussion, this last legislative cycle. Again, we've kind of been ahead of it, very fortunately. Traffic light wise, it's mostly TxDOT roads. We only have a couple traffic lights that we actually own. We'll do speed studies and some other things. But we really try to make database decisions as much as we possibly can. Where technology can come into play. The problem is a lot of folks are really proud of their stuff, and since we're not in a high growth area, it's hard for us sometimes to justify or rationalize the expense if it's not there. We are this is just Dalton Rice's professional opinion on this. A lot of cities that are growing at 6% or more a year are able to take on the growth, and they can absorb some of these costs as revenues, property taxes, sales tax, and everything come in. But there is going to be a point, a diminishing return on that once it hits, they're going to be in the exact same situation that Kerrville is in just a different point in time. So we are already seeing that, where we're having stabilized appraised values. We have the state legislation, putting property tax caps on, and then wanting to put expenditure caps on that as well. We have, so we're only putting in about $30 million of new value a year in. Most of that is residential. And oh, by the way, we have a property tax freeze, for 65 and over, which actually takes about, 25% of our taxable value within the city, about $2.4 million a year in the general fund. So we are, in my opinion, a city that other cities should look at of saying, all right, when we hit this point of no return, when we hit the economies of scale for sales tax, for build out, for all these other things, how are we going to overcome that? And a lot of that, unfortunately, even though it should not be on a local level, the politics drive some of those issues. And especially when the politics are split even more than just three parties, if you will, um, there's fractures within the parties themselves, and that's creating a lot of issues, especially here in Kerrville.
Yeah, no, Dalton, I've heard that story about we're not growing from so many towns and then all of a sudden. And, I think we've been doing this program for about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years now. And I think some weeks back, we talked about that great Texas Monthly article on what's happening in small towns
Yep.
in Texas. And how the movement, but it was based on wealthy people coming in and really, really buying parts of the town and bringing the town back to where it was and bring all of the great, we have castles in counties as county houses, if you will, in
Yeah.
Kerrville. So I think if you take a look at it, what is the impact, for example, on the immigration policy in Washington now and your workforce in Kerrville? Because I know that in Texas we depend a lot upon opportunity structure from Mexico. Did you find that it's more fearful? People are more fearful. Did you find that it's having a negative impact? People are less likely to apply for jobs. What are you finding there, Dalton?
We're not really seeing that here. We're not really being touched with a lot of the national political issues.
Hmm.
We're being more impacted by state issues than the national side of things.
Mhm.
Our unemployment again is matching what our housing is, and for a few years we were kind of behind on the housing side. Supply was down, demand was up. Drove the price, how cost of houses up. This is a very custom home area. There's not a lot of cookie cutter homes or attainable or affordable houses here. And so, city council had to kind of tackle that. Most of our industry here is going to be government, is going to be the school, is going to be the hospital. We have a hospital system here. We have a VA here actually as well. Just hit its centennial last year. And so, yeah, we have not seen or the impact on the workforce from any of the immigration policies, not
Yeah.
here.
Let me ask you a couple of questions, Dalton. So you own your own utility, electric utility.
Mhm.
You own your own street lights.
Oh, we only actually have a couple streetlights that we own. Most everything is tech stop.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So not many street lights in Kerrville.
Nope. So I mean, there's streetlights in Kerrville, but most of them are tech dot owned.
Got it. Interesting. So, I was going to tell you that there's a new thinking about turning streetlights into a digital infrastructure platform for revenue, as the streetlights of the future could have solar panels, energy storage. They could have radio roaming with carriers that do cell phones, and they could provide Wi-Fi, and they could provide all kinds of AI-enabled computing using sensors for like motion, traffic, optical, sound, air quality, temperature, things like that. Have you ever heard of anything like that? Any thoughts of that?
I've heard it before. I came from Mont Bellevue, which did kind of the first broadband initiative, as a utility, as a municipal utility.
Hmm.
Um, our electric company is a separate board and it's a
Hmm.
separate CEO. However, the city council is responsible or owns it.
Hmm.
It's really just a subsidiary of the city. And we're actually our electric company we are actually getting into power generation right now. And
Good.
so we are the first, and I think we are the only municipality, but we are the first group that actually tapped into the Texas Energy Fund to do
Hmm.
power generation to increase or diversify our portfolio,
Hmm.
on the market. So we are now being able to go into business under a public facilities corporation to buy power off of a system that we own and then draw revenue, on it by putting it back on the grid for unused power.
Awesome.
And so
Awesome.
that's a couple $100 million project. I will say that that project is having some national implications, with tariffs. We are navigating, the tariffs on that because the engines are coming from Germany.
Right.
And so we're having to do that. But, we do put glass. We do have some fiber that is run on our lines.
Mhm.
Um, and we actually, I think we put in a middle mile grant. So we are trying to seek out technology and how we can better use, a municipally owned
Mhm.
service to be able to expand some of the technology functions. Unfortunately, and I mean, I hate to say this, but I'll say it anyways. The state, when they get their hands on things, will mess it up. And when you look at
Mhm.
like the broadband infrastructure fund, while that is great in theory, it's
Yeah, it
never been
hasn't worked.
tapped into because the technology has changed and fiber in a way is already obsolete to a certain extent.
Sure.
And so we're navigating, how quick technology changes, and man, the pace of government is slow. And
Mhm.
so, trying to keep up with that, trying to keep up with the cost is challenging.
Well said. It's interesting that you guys are wanting to do generation. I congratulate you on that. I think that the key of the formula of the future is to have enough power, telecommunication backbone, sort of dark fiber and water infrastructure so that you can have the next businesses move to Kerrville. Sort of. So with that said, anybody wanting to come to Kerrville to build a data center to leverage your low KW rates?
Yeah, data centers are an extremely controversial thing.
Hmm.
The county is navigating some battery energy storage areas. A lot of best operators are wanting to go into counties because they're unregulated. Cities are regulated, which is a good thing.
Hmm.
Um, when it comes to data centers, one of the biggest challenges is the data centers themselves have to innovate because the water consumption that it takes for them, for those data centers is unbelievable. And then when you add the noise in the Texas Hill Country, people like their conservation. I mean, just in the city alone, I have 1,000 acres of parkland that's untapped, untouched.
Hmm.
And so we're not saying no to data centers, but there's got to be a conservation effort. There's got to be self-contained systems in there, and there's got to be some things that are going to, that need to be addressed, with that. Our
Hmm.
airport is probably our flattest land that we have, which is not saying much. And again, it costs a lot of money to build here. And so we own 87 acres by the airport. We were going to be bringing in an autoclaved aerated concrete plant. They ended up having some challenges. They weren't able to do it, and so, we're partnering with Greater San Antonio Partnership on, what are some manufacturing areas or what are some aviation things, whether that's aviation or non-aviation, that we can
Hmm.
kind of turn the airport into like a light industrial area.
Sure, absolutely. Johnny?
Yeah, from what I am hearing is that you are growing. You are having some growing pains. And let me just ask you now about the relationship between where you are. I mean, you're out in the hill country, right? You're gorgeous part of the state and your conservation areas. And when you look at these small towns that's in proximity to cities, and I grew up in one just north of New Orleans, there is a sense that simply nothing would change. And then when you talk about what the state of Texas is doing and what they are messing up, but the most important thing I think is generation of electricity.
Yeah.
We've discussed on this program that America might be headed for a Pearl Harbor when it comes to electricity. We think that we have enough, but with the electrification of America, everything from automobiles, right, to houses, remember, I mean, they're the new electrification of housing when it comes to sensors and that kind of stuff. And then about a year and a half ago, we had a woman on the program who was doing all of their generation and getting off of the grid. So my question is, when you talk about data centers and when you talk about those kind of things that will, I mean, to run a data center, it takes as much electricity to run a small city, right? Are you prepared to get off of the grid and go generation independent completely and have your own generation? independent of Texas
He is
grid?
the grid. He is the grid, Johnny. He is a utility.
Yeah,
Well,
but
so we
yeah, but
are
what I'm saying,
still on
well,
our
that's
side.
my point. That's my question.
Yeah.
Are you going to take your utility independent?
I really, that's not realistic in my opinion. And
Yeah.
the reason why, when you start looking at, well, one, politics plays a large role in everything energy, right, wrong, or indifferent. And when you start looking out here, we don't have the ability to run enough gas out here to sustain. I mean, our power generation is not even in our county.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's a couple hundred miles away. So we're
Right.
basically just adding it onto the grid to do that. So realistically, if you want to, be able to operate and do it independently off the grid, conserve green energy and green things cost money.
Mm-hmm.
Conservation is easier and cheaper. But if
Sure.
I'm trying to go in and say, hey, we're going to have a whole complete, reuse water system, which we actually do. We do use a lot of reuse,
Mm-hmm.
but all of that stuff costs money. I don't make money off of my reuse. When
Mm-hmm.
you look at oil and gas, when you look at green energy, and again, it doesn't matter where you sit on the spectrum, there is relationships to all of these. And so, I know there was a discussion at one point, but the realistic side is I just think it's unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking to people who think it's realistic to have a complete separate grid that runs everything in the city, as it was in the 1920s, and when we did electrification of America. So I think it's pretty wild. So what do you think about the availability? Do you think we're headed toward an electrical issue with the electrification of America?
Well, I don't know. And, when we look at Snowvid 1.0, in 2021, obviously the Texas grid had some challenges, and some would argue that, well, Texas is its own independent energy, state, and we're not on the national grid, which,
Mm-hmm.
again, depending on which side of the argument you are on, you know, you can argue both sides of that, right?
How, how
And
was how was Kerrville during that storm and all that?
Yeah, there was some folks that lost power, of course. I think
Mm-hmm.
across the board there was, outages. I was in a different city when that happened. In
Mm-hmm.
my previous city, we had about 1,000 homes that were out of power for a week. Um, we saw the grid shift. My house in Mont Belvieu, where I was moving from, is typically on a grid that stays powered 24/7, 365 because it's running, the grid is powering natural gas plants and fractionators and frac units, and oil and gas was very heavy down there. Well, when
Mm-hmm.
Snowvid hit, those were the things that they actually powered off. So I was out of power for a week in Mont Belvieu. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, there definitely needs to be something done, and there's going to be some changes and some challenges, with it. And I think the free market overall is doing the best that they can with navigating that. I mean, when you look at natural gas, power generation, these are on-demand systems. Well,
Mm-hmm.
when you have an on-demand system, you're basically assuming that there's going to need to be a demand, whether that's peak load or not. Well, some will argue that, that's because of green energy. Some will argue that that's because, well, there's not enough natural gas or there's not enough distribution. I'm not a power guy. That's definitely not my area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Across the board, I do think that politics plays a bigger role than I think we really want it to.
Okay, that's a good answer because I think that when we go around the state, you get different. To me, the more rural you are, the more people think about, having their own electrification, their own power, and the unreliability and just going independent again. But I think that's farther in West
Well,
Texas.
Well, let me also just caveat this too. Let's take a business approach to it. Let's take City of Kerrville and say, you know what? I want to go off grid or maybe semi off grid. I want to put solar panels on everything and go that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I have to look of how do I pay for that? Do I take government subsidies that I'm going to have to add now to a maintenance plan and a replacement plan? How long do those work? If I'm in a high damage area from hail and everything else, how many, am I going to generate enough electricity to offset my maintenance and fixed asset replacement plan and infrastructure plan to be able to do that?
Right.
And what does that look like? Because if I put more infrastructure on, now I have to add more dollars, it's a liability,
Hmm.
and I'm going to have these assets on the books that I'm going to have to repair and replace. Well, when you look at the data, and I don't know the data off the top of my head, but when you look at these solar farms, what's the damage, what's the M&O and the R&M to maintain those. And if I take that and apply that wattage to a city, I could probably either make a business sense of it or I'm not going to make a business sense of it. My hypothesis is I would not be able to make the business sense to be able to do it, because if I have cloud cover, if I have all of this, I'm going to have, if you give a mouse a cookie, right? I'm going to have something to continue the redundancy in order to maintain that level of service, or that maintain that grid in order to do that. And at what cost am I willing to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let me just switch the topic to something that can make some money. Llewellyn was talking about golf course. I'm a founding member, have found two golf courses here in Austin, the Austin Golf Club, which is, we call it Ben Crenshaw's Club, and the Great Hills Country Club, which is at my house. So I'm a big golfer. I want to know about what's going on. I have played golf in Kerrville before. I want to know what's going on. Why are you guys building more golf courses? Is it for tourism? Is it for the local population? Is golf becoming more popular? What's your business model? Is it private or is it public?
So
And
yeah, so currently we have three golf courses.
mhm.
I say we. Kerrville has three golf courses. One of them, two of them are clubs or privately owned, and then one is a municipal golf course. We actually just put about $4 or $5 million into it, and it is we'll call it, it's a mid to higher range, a municipal course. We just got that wrapped up recently. Um, the golf course that's going to be going in is done by a guy named Dale Beto. He does a lot of tournament level golf courses around the world, and so this is going to be higher end. So these homes, they're going to be anywhere between $1 to $10 million homes. It's going to have a resort style hotel, and then some express hotels as well with some retail. And they do pretty well. And so for us, even though our median age is in the 40s ish, give or take, we have a big retirement population. Again, 65 and over comprises of about 25% of our taxable value. And so we have a lot of folks that are golfing. The Kerrville Shriner Golf Course is actually, is a very old golf course. I think we just hit our centennial as well. It was either Centennial or 75. I've slept since then, but
Mhm.
it's an older golf course. We do use reuse water to irrigate. That is one advantage that we have. We do about 200 to 300 million gallons of reuse water a year, so we have some good conservation measures. But no, our golf course is a big staple of the community, and it is played pretty frequently.
Yeah, you are about, I'm guessing, an hour from San Antonio. I just don't understand why Georgetown is becoming Austin, and quite frankly, Waco is becoming Austin,
Yep,
and right, and San Marcos is becoming Austin.
yep.
What's keeping San Antonio from spoiling your city? I mean, you're only right up the road, because it would seem to me that what has happened in Austin, all of the cities around, of course, we did the high tech stuff. But I can
Yep.
remember when Georgetown High School had 60 kids that graduated. And now there are how many high schools there? So what's your relationship now to San Antonio? Is it moving that way, or is it staying away from you? Why isn't San Antonio gobbling you up?
That's a great question. And, we have just east of us, I'd say the next bigger city is Bernie, city of Bernie.
Hmm.
They're about halfway. They're going to get gobbled up long before us. We have another town, very, very small, called Comfort, Texas, connects I-10 and just outside of Kerrville. My opinion on this is that's about as far west as San Antonio is gonna make it, if it does, and probably not in my lifetime. And the
Mm.
reason why I say that is the train out here is so challenging and so expensive.
Mm.
Just for
Mm.
500 homes, and let's call them attainable homes, just the flat work to build in the hills was $32 million just for 500 homes.
Oh, wow.
So you have a lot of rock, right?
it is a lot of rock. It is a lot of elevation, a lot of drainage issues. I got 16 watersheds in Kerr County alone.
Yeah, I
And so,
understand. My house is right up from the bridge from Austin. It's all rock and it's all hill country. I mean, matter
yep.
of fact, it looks like Kerrville once you get into Great Hills. Right.
Yeah. And so I don't think it'll be in my lifetime. I think the best that we can hope for is it'll make it to comfort just because the land is a little bit easier to build at. And I think you can start seeing housing, potentially push west. And I
Mm.
think that'll benefit the city of Kerrville at some point by being able to have closer workforce without being in the city limits of Kerrville.
Well, let me
Mm.
give you an example. Andreas and I was up at Killeen, which is a good hour and a half from Austin. And we were talking about workforces, and the city manager said the following. We're North Austin now,
Yep.
and I kind of looked at Andreas, and then I have friends who are selling their houses in Austin and moving to Waco. With the I-35 improvements, then it's on an hour and 10 minutes now. So my question is this: I think that the fast trains, it won't be digging the highway. I think when the fast trains hit the hill country, and I think they will, it might not, you're right, it might not be in our lifetime,
Yeah.
but I think it would, the movement of people and also the movement of people away from the central places. Remember, Austin, Texas used to be just a small town, you know,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
all. When I got
But
here,
but
and yeah,
but thinking your thought process, Dalton. I mean, you are, I-10 is crossing your town,
Yeah, it is.
and the traffic of I-10 is off the charts.
You know, and
How do you
and
how do you make how do you make 35% of those trucks and people stop in Kerrville?
well, and that's a really interesting thing, and this is one of the great things about government that we really don't have to necessarily worry about. Our economic development teams do, but
Hmm.
here's the thing. Until volume, and all the traffic data and everything else comes out, these
Yeah,
private industries, they know exactly where they're going to go based off the data
yeah,
and the traffic patterns.
yeah.
And what's interesting is you're slowly starting to see a shift, but not because of Kerrville, but because of the region. For
Hmm.
example, we are getting an academy now. So
Mm.
we are now going to be I don't have to drive to San Antonio anymore to go to Academy, which means
Hmm.
that Academy saw the value of the
Yep,
volume in the region by saying not just 55,000 people, but maybe 120,000 because they're
yep.
going to pull from Junction, from Medina, from Bandera, from some of these
That's
other
right.
areas.
That's right.
And so the private sector is going to do what the private sector does best, and they are going to site select based off of the data and the information that is out there. And
Yeah.
I think that's where we can really start seeing what trends are happening and what we can anticipate in both workforce and jobs and housing and the shift of the economy and how quickly are we going to see a change in that. A great
I
Yeah.
think
example
you're
of this is
exactly right.
I would say that maybe the fact that you're just far enough from San Antonio, it's a blessing, Dalton, for the following things. If we think that people in the cities could be a hub to a regional area. So when you think about Enchanted Rock, Great Creek Vineyards, I mean, these things are really like 30 minutes from you.
Yep.
And you could become a hub because you have I-10. That
Yep.
means all the California people and all the Florida people going I-10 back and forth. And
Yep.
they should discover. I mean, Kerrville is a beautiful town.
Yep. Well, and that's some of the areas that we're, kind of tackling. We're trying to tackle some of the hotel issues. We're working on some of the tourism side. We're going to be doing a big, market push. Obviously we had a devastating flood in July of last year, and the communities, in the process of bouncing back from that. And what does the tourism side and the marketing look like?
And
We
you
know.
have you have this you have the no, nobody knows this, but you have what is called the Museum of Western Art, which is a great facility.
It is, yep. It's a Museum of Western Art is a great facility. We actually have the Callow Theater, which is a municipally owned theater that we kind of contract out. But we have um, this the symphony that comes out here. We have I mean we have a lot of plays. We are the 50th music friendly city in the state. Big
Mhm.
music scene, huge music scene. The Kerrville Folk Festival, which has been around for decades, is out here. And
Mhm.
so it is a lot of it is marketing. A lot of it is making sure that we have the facilities. Our hotels have been historically outdated, and now we're starting to see new owners come in to remodel, to revamp them, redevelop them. So
Mhm.
our economic development team has been over the last year and a half has really been on kind of a redevelopment kick. um, we have a beautiful downtown, that's thriving now, that's walkable, and it's got restaurants and boutiques and bars and other things. We just did a facade improvement grant through one of our tax increment reinvestment zones, and we had over 40 applicants, for it. So we're starting to see a big shift into redevelopment, which is important, and I think that's going to help enhance a lot of what we're doing.
Well, we would love to see if there's a way of helping you with the SDG City Index, maturity model, and roadmap to become, the most sustainable smart city in West Texas. I love the location. I think it's a home run where you're sitting and what's happening, and you're definitely the right guy to make this happen, Dalton.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you all.
Yeah, and I think it's going to come as fast as you think it's going to come. When they start calling you San Antonio North, I like they do. They call me the North Shore of New Orleans. I say I'm not from New Orleans. I'm from the Covington, Frankton, to Slaughter area. No, you're from the North Shore. I
Yeah,
think
no,
that's from, and
it's going to be interesting.
I also think, Dalton, in terms of the technology, I do think that interacting even in the job market with the new technologies and the smart city. I think you look into that and
Yep,
look at how your city can make money on the new technologies. That is making poles very very smart and those things
yep.
that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're very fortunate through K-Pub, which is our electric company. They are, being an enterprise and being a well-established enterprise, they are able to do a lot more in that spectrum. And they are looking at, technology. They are looking at advancing that. So it's good that, it doesn't necessarily have a government arm, but it's also good that it has a government arm because we control the right of ways, we control the poles, we control those things. And that is one advantage that I know our K-Pub CEO is looking at, and some of the stuff their board is looking at.
Yeah. And definitely your partnership with TxDOT is super critical
Oh, absolutely.
because
Yeah,
of
we have a
I-10.
great partnership with TxDOT. I mean, just from emergency management all the way to, I mean, everything. They um very fortunate with the relationship that we have with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Dalton, we are looking forward to keeping in touch, and thank you for the time. And can you share what's in front of you the next 90 days, 180 days, activities, anything going on that we should know about? Anything is going to get approved or passed by council? What's going on?
Yeah, we're mostly, already into budget season. We're navigating, challenging budgets, so that's, kind of our big focus. Power generation is still going on. We're going to be doing our ribbon cutting, with K-Pub here soon, I believe in April on that one. We're constantly looking at, new wells and some, water redundancies and some other, systems. We do have an election coming up in May, so it's political season, with the primaries. Politics out here are extremely volatile in the county. We're hoping that it'll stay away from the city. It typically doesn't, but knock on wood, we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, we're right. We're still in the process of long-term recovery. We're putting new parks, parks back together that got damaged and destroyed. We're still in a pretty heavy rebuilding and reimagining phase right now, just post floods. Getting ready, of course, for the anniversary, and everything in July. But the city's thriving and the city is healing well. We have so many different events going on at any one point in time from everything from music to to theater to to the river. I mean to camping. I mean Kerrville has it all. We're kind of a jack of all trades, which is amazing.
Yeah. Johnny, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the Kerrville Festival, it's like our South by Southwest. You can't
Yep.
beat those things. Or Mardi Gras,
Yep.
the city of my birth, which we're about to start. it's pretty interesting how festivals can have a big impact on everything. And you're right, Kerrville is absolutely a gorgeous city, and I would say, keep the music alive. And I haven't been to that folk festival before. I'm an old guitarist from the old days. I started my living, thinking about playing guitar, and I think that, as I said before, you're closer than you think. I think the technology is bringing everybody to the center of everybody else. And I don't know what the politics are, but in my father's word, just make money and stay away from the politics.
Yeah, we try our hardest to do that. Unfortunately, we're government, so it always finds us.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny, take us away.
Okay. I've been down this road before. I remember every tree, every single blade of grass holds a special meaning for me. And I remember everything, things I can't forget. The way you turned and smiled on me on the first night that we met. And I remember every night, the ocean eyes of blue, how I miss you in the morning light, like the roses missed a dew.
Woo! Thank you, Johnny.
Right. I have to
Dalton, all the best.
Hey, appreciate
Congratulations
it.
on everything you're
Thank you. I'll
doing.
come down to the festival and light it up for you guys.
Yeah, come on. Come
All
on.
right.
Y'all
Take
have a
care,
good one.
Andres. I'll see you in 2 minutes. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, take care, guys.
Mhm.
Thank you.